The sun was already sinking behind the hills when Helena squeezed Barbara's hand, her heart racing. The great city rose before them like a giant of stone and light. Carriages gleamed beneath golden lamplights, and the cobblestone streets still glistened damp from the summer rain. The young woman clutched her small fabric bag, far too simple for such a grand scene, and tried to take in every detail. The noise, the colors, the movement. A flutter in her stomach reminded her how far she was from home and from the safety of the small village she'd left behind. "You're going to love it," said Barbara excitedly, tugging her by the hand. "This party will be unforgettable. No one will judge you here, Helena. Tonight is yours." Helena smiled shyly, though uncertainty still pulsed in her chest. She had never set foot in such a luxurious event. Her life had been made of long days, field work, sewing, and caring for her parents. The village had always been the edge of her world, until now. Something inside her whispered that this night was her chance to see beyond, to feel something different, even if only for a few hours. They passed through the ornate iron gate where golden arabesques gleamed under the light. A marble staircase led them into a dazzling hall, illuminated by crystal chandeliers that scattered shimmering reflections everywhere. The sound of violins and flutes mingled with the laughter of women, adorned in jewels and extravagant dresses. Elegant men stood in groups, champagne glasses in hand, watching the newcomers with curiosity. Helena felt as though she had stepped through a portal into another world, one as beautiful as it was dangerous. "Wow," she whispered, mesmerized. "Come on," Barbara urged, pulling her by the hand. "Tonight is yours. Forget the rules, forget the judgments, just live." Helena took a deep breath. The sound of the music, the scent of expensive perfume in the air, the warmth of the room, it all made the walls within her begin to crumble. She laughed louder than she ever had before and felt an almost intoxicating sense of freedom. One of the girls suggested a game to see who could win over the most handsome man at the party. Helena blushed, laughing nervously, but joined in. "This is madness," she murmured, laughing. "I wouldn't even know what to say to a man like that." "Be daring, just for one night," said Barbara with a wink. And that was how Helena, without realizing it, took her first step toward the unknown. But the most handsome man at the party wasn't just any guest. He was the king himself, disguised to escape the stiffness of court life and quietly observe his people. When Helena saw him standing in the corner, speaking with a few gentlemen, the world seemed to stop. His regal bearing, sharp gaze, and the aura of power surrounding him made him stand out from all the others. Yet there was also a curious gentleness in his eyes, something that made her forget her fear.
Gathering her courage, she stepped closer. "Good evening," she said, her voice trembling. "May I introduce myself?" He turned calmly and smiled. "Good evening," he replied, his tone deep and steady. "The pleasure is all mine." A shiver ran through Helena, unbidden, uncontrollable. There was something magnetic about that man, something that made the rest of the world fade away. They talked for long minutes that felt like mere seconds, and before they realized it, they were no longer strangers, but two souls bound by an intense and unexpected connection. Later, amid the scent of flowers and the silver glow of moonlight in the garden, he said softly, "Sometimes one must lose themselves a little to truly be found." And that night, Helena allowed herself to live, without guilt, without the weight of the past, only the present. It was a night of freedom, surrender, and discovery. And it would also mark the beginning of something that would change her life forever. The train ride back to the village felt endless. The memory of the party still danced in her mind, the laughter, the perfume, the touch of the mysterious man, Yet an uneasy feeling stirred within her. When she arrived at the station, the cold morning air wrapped around her. She walked down the dirt road, eager to see her home again. But as she neared it, a bitter smell of smoke filled the air. She ran. And then she saw. The fire had taken everything. Her home, her parents, her safety, everything she loved had turned to ashes. The ground seemed to vanish beneath her feet. She cried until she had no more tears, surrounded by neighbors who could do nothing but watch. That night, before the ruins, Helena understood the true meaning of loneliness. In the days that followed, she sought shelter and work, but no one could help her. Hungry and lost, she made a decision. She would leave the village and start a new life in the city. Standing before her parents' improvised grave, she swore, "I will survive, for you." The city was cruel. Busy streets, hurried people, doors closing in her face. Helena looked for work in markets, shops, restaurants, always without success. Until, by chance, a well-dressed young woman approached, holding a torn dress. "Could you mend this for me?" she asked. Helena accepted. Her hands worked swiftly, stitching the embroidery with precision. "It's perfect!" she exclaimed. "I'm Katerina, Princess Katerina. I need someone like you at the castle." Helena could hardly believe it. It felt like a dream, or perhaps a new beginning. She accepted the invitation.
The days in the castle brought back something Helena thought she had lost: hope. As Princess Katerina's seamstress, she devoted herself with passion. Katerina saw more than talent in her. She saw strength, serenity, and kindness. Soon, a sincere friendship blossomed between them. "You turned fabric into magic, Helena," the princess said one day. "You have no idea what a gift you possess." The compliment made Helena smile. After so much pain, someone finally saw her for who she truly was. One afternoon, Katerina made an unexpected proposal. "I want you to come with me to tonight's ball." Helena hesitated, but the princess insisted. "Just one night to be whoever you want to be." And Helena agreed. Dressed in a deep shade of blue, embroidered with stars, she seemed made of light itself. When she entered the grand hall, every gaze turned toward her, including that of a man watching intently. The king. In disguise once again. The very same man from that night. When their eyes met, time seemed to stop. He approached, his voice soft but sure. "May I have the honor of this dance?" Helena nodded, her heart racing. When their hands touched, a vivid memory swept through her body. The garden, the moonlight, the touch, the kiss. But she kept her disguise. He, however, felt something familiar. There was something about this woman that intrigued him deeply. As they danced, she murmured without thinking, "Sometimes we just want to lose ourselves for a few hours and forget the world outside."
The king paused. The words echoed in his mind. It was the same phrase he had heard from the mysterious woman at the party, the same tone, the same sweetness. His gaze deepened into hers. "It's you," he whispered, barely audibly. But Helena didn't notice. She continued to dance, her heart caught between fear and desire. And in that ballroom, surrounded by luxury and curious eyes, she realized that fate was weaving their threads together once more, this time in a way even more dangerous and irresistible. Days had passed since the ball, but Helena's memory continued to haunt the king like a mark that couldn't be erased. her image, the restrained smile, the grace in every gesture, and the light that emanated even from her simplicity returned to his mind in every moment of silence. He watched her whenever he could, hiding his fascination beneath a mask of serenity. And whenever he crossed paths with her in the castle halls, his heart would quicken, as if each of her movements carried a secret waiting to be revealed. Helena, in turn, tried to remain composed. In the princess's atelier, she devoted herself to her embroidery and fabrics, filling her days with the rhythmic sound of the needle and the soft touch of silk threads. Yet no matter how hard she tried, her thoughts always circled back to the same point, to the king's lingering glances, to the way his presence seemed to warm the air. Pretending distraction, she looked away and acted unaware, though her body betrayed her in subtle ways. A faint blush on her cheeks, a tremor in her hands, a breath that grew shallow whenever he was near. The king, silently, began to notice what others missed: the way she furrowed her brow when concentrating, the graceful dance of her fingers over the fabric, the gentle tone of her voice when she spoke with Katerina. There was something disarming about Helena, a rare purity, a sincerity that stood in sharp contrast to the calculated coldness of court life. He still lacked the courage to confront her, fearing a reckless gesture might drive her away. But with each passing day, his conviction grew stronger. She was the woman from that unforgettable night.
On a rainy afternoon, she sewed in silence, the sound of the rain keeping a soft rhythm against the windows. The green velvet in her hands seemed to hold all her focus, until a gentle voice made her look up. "Helena," said the king, approaching with measured steps. Startled, she dropped the needle and stood quickly. "Your Majesty, I wasn't expecting you here." He stopped in front of her, his gaze steady yet kind. "I need to speak with you," he said directly. "There's something I can no longer keep to myself." Helena's heart began to race. Something in the way he looked at her made the air feel thin. "If it's about the dress, I can finish it today," she replied, trying to deflect the tension. "It's not about the dress," he interrupted, his tone low, almost a whisper. "It's about you." She shivered. Deep down, she knew what was coming. "I know," he said, stepping closer, his eyes locked on hers. "I know who you are." Helena froze. The needle slipped from her fingers. You do?" she stammered, unbelieving. "I never forgot that night," he continued, his voice calm and steady. "Since my wife's death, I thought I'd never be able to feel something like that again. And then you appeared and reminded me what it means to be alive." His words washed over her like a wave of warmth. Helena felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. "Your Majesty, I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he answered softly. "Just believe me. That night was real. I wasn't pretending." Helena looked away, fighting back tears. Everything she had buried came rushing back: the touch, the laughter, the feeling of freedom. "But you're the king," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "And I'm just a seamstress." He smiled, a sad, sincere smile. "I know who you are, and that's exactly what captivates me. I don't want titles or appearances. I want you, Helena." A shiver ran down her spine, though fear still lingered in her heart. "And if the world doesn't accept it?" she whispered. He stepped closer still, his voice deep and calm. "Then we'll leave the world for later." Helena looked into his eyes, and for the first time didn't see a king, but a man, vulnerable, passionate, and true. "What do we do now?" she asked, her voice trembling. He smiled. Now we live. And when she placed her hand in his, it was as if the weight of the past simply faded away.
From that day on, their love grew in silence. They exchanged glances in the corridors, soft words in the gardens, and stolen moments beneath the starlight. The king found in her the lightness he had lost through years of solitude. Helena, in turn, felt alive, loved, and free for the first time since the tragedy that had shattered her life. But fate would soon put their love to the test. The Queen Mother, a stern and watchful woman, quickly noticed the change in her son's behavior. The smiles, the absences, the knowing looks exchanged with the simple young woman. It did not take long for suspicion to turn into certainty. One afternoon, she caught them talking by the garden fountain. She approached in silence, her gaze sharp as steel. "Philip," she called, her voice cold, "we need to talk." The king nodded reluctantly and walked away with his mother. Helena stood frozen, her heart racing. The queen wasted no time in getting to the point. "I know about your attachment to that girl, a commoner, nameless, without lineage. It is unacceptable." "Mother, please," he replied, his tone firm but restrained. "Helena is different. She is noble in spirit, even without titles." "Nobility lies not in spirit, Philip, but in blood. A king does not marry for love. A king marries out of duty." He drew a deep breath, struggling against the weight of her words. "Duty without love is a prison. Helena has brought life back to me." "Then you shall learn to forget her," she declared, turning her back to him. "The girl will leave the castle before nightfall."
When Helena was summoned to the great hall, she already knew what awaited her. The queen stood above her, imposing and cold. "You must leave," she said without preamble. "Your presence here is a distraction." Helena tried to answer, but her voice failed her. The king stepped forward, taking her hands in his composure barely concealing his desperation. "Helena," he murmured, unable to defy his own mother, "forgive me." She smiled through tearful eyes. "I will never forget you." "And I will never leave you alone," he promised, squeezing her hand one last time. And so, with a broken heart, Helena left the castle. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor like a lament. In the days that followed, the king wandered through the empty palace, feeling her absence like an open wound. And Helena, now far away, worked in silence, trying not only to sew fabric, but to stitch back together the pieces of her own heart. Still, despite the distance and the pain, they both carried the same certainty. Their story was not yet over. After being expelled from the castle, Helena felt as though the ground had been torn from beneath her feet. The world she knew had crumbled, and each step through the city streets grew heavier than the last. She walked aimlessly, her heart oppressed, her eyes misted with tears. Every unfamiliar face she passed reminded her of the loneliness now surrounding her. For days, she went door to door, offering herself for any kind of work. But the city was merciless to girls without names, without family, without protection. Some laughed at her despair, others pretended not to hear. The nights were even worse. Wrapped in worn blankets bought with a few coins, she slept in squares and alleys, trying to keep the cold and the hopelessness away. In the long silences, she thought of her lost parents, the castle she had left behind, and the love that seemed torn from her chest by force. Each tear that fell carried not only pain, but also a reminder that she could not give up. She had to go on. She had to survive, if only to preserve her own dignity. Salvation, when it came, arrived unexpectedly. One afternoon, while helping an old woman mend a torn dress at the market, she received an offer, a job. Exhausted and starving, Helena accepted without hesitation. The work was neither noble nor easy, but it offered a roof, food, and a fragile sense of stability. She would serve in the home of an influential family, connected to the crown, though far from the royal halls, tending to cleaning and household duties. The first days were brutal. Her body, unaccustomed to such hard labor, soon rebelled. Blistered hands, swollen feet, sleepless nights. Each morning brought new exhaustion, new challenges. She scrubbed floors, served formal dinners, washed, cooked, and answered the whims of nobles, always under the sharp, expectant gaze of those who demanded perfection. Still, she endured. Every completed task was a quiet act of defiance, a way of rebuilding the foundations of her spirit and proving that fate would not break her. With time, Helena adapted. She learned to read her employer's moods, to anticipate their needs before they spoke. She came to know every corner of the house, every face, every routine. Gradually, the stability of her work brought a subtle relief, a quiet sense of safety she hadn't felt since the peaceful days of her childhood. For the first time in a long while, she could breathe easily, eat regularly, and dream, if only timidly, of a calmer future. But fate, true to its cruel nature, soon intervened. It began with dizziness, then a persistent fatigue she blamed on overwork. When the symptoms could no longer be ignored, the truth struck her with inescapable force. Helena was pregnant. Locked in her small room, she spent days trying to process the news. Her face buried in her hands, her eyes staring out the window, she wondered how she would raise a child alone. She had no home, no family, no means. And yet within her grew the life of the man she loved, the king. Every soft heartbeat she imagined hearing was a reminder that that unforgettable night had marked her forever. Hugging her knees, she whispered to herself, searching for courage where only fear remained. "I can do this. I must be strong. I cannot fail him or this life that depends on me." The weight of responsibility nearly suffocated her, yet alongside it came a new strength. She knew she had to act. She couldn't hide something so important, nor lie to the woman who had given her a second chance. If she were discovered, she would lose everything again. So, on a clear morning, she went to her employer's office, her heart pounding, and confessed everything. "Madam," she began, her voice trembling, I'm with child. The father is not here, and I have nowhere else to go." She braced for the worst: reprimand, scorn, immediate dismissal. But the woman merely regarded her in silence, her gaze calm and kind. "Helena," she said, at last, her tone firm but gentle, "you are brave, and courage is a rare virtue. Stay. Continue with us." The words struck her like an embrace. Tears streamed down her cheeks, this time of relief. "I promise I won't disappoint you," she whispered. "I know you won't," she replied, resting a hand on her shoulder. "Take care of yourself. Take care of your child. The rest we'll face together." In the days that followed, Helena worked with renewed determination. She saved every coin, planned every expense, and organized her future with the precision of someone who knew she could rely on no one but herself. Despite her fears, she felt a new strength, a flicker of hope. She had a purpose now, and that was enough. Still, the king never left her thoughts. Sometimes, while sewing or serving dinner, she would remember him, his touch, his voice, his eyes that seemed to pierce through time. The child she carried was the link between that past and her uncertain present, a living reminder of a love that, though forbidden, had never truly died. But fate, once again, was weaving its own plans.
The grand hall of the house where she worked shimmered beneath the glow of crystal chandeliers. The air smelled of wine, wax, and spices. Nobles and advisors gathered in hushed conversations as glasses clinked and servants moved about with silver trays. Helena glided among them with grace and precision, balancing plates and goblets, hiding her exhaustion beneath a calm expression. But something about that night was different. A murmur swept through the hall, and silence suddenly fell. When Helena lifted her eyes, time seemed to stop. At the entrance stood the king, dressed in his ceremonial uniform, his gaze sharp yet regal. He scanned the room, until his eyes found hers. The world seemed to vanish. Helena's heart raced, her hands trembling. He recognized her. The king's eyes softened, filled with emotion, surprise, and something deeper, the certainty that his search was over. "Helena!" her mistress called, breaking the moment. "Keep serving, my dear." "Yes, ma'am," she replied, trying to steady her voice. The king, however, did not look away. He walked slowly toward the main table, maintaining royal composure, yet unable to hide the intensity in his gaze. Helena, feeling the weight of his presence, struggled to move naturally. Every gesture, every motion was a battle between duty and desire. Throughout the dinner, as the king spoke with his allies, his eyes sought her out among the guests. It was as if time had turned back, and every memory of that night still pulsed between them. Helena, in turn, felt torn between caution and longing. The secret she carried bound her to silence, yet her yearning burned like a hidden flame. At one point, she had to approach his table. Her palms were damp. He looked up, and a faint smile, soft yet full of emotion, lit his face. "Lady Helena," he said quietly, "what a surprise, and what joy to see you here." "Your Majesty," she replied, keeping her composure, though her heart felt ready to burst. "It is an honor to serve you." Their exchange was brief, but charged with meaning. He did not yet know about her pregnancy, but something in his eyes suggested he already sensed the invisible bond between them. When the evening drew to a close and the guests began to disperse, the king found a moment to approach her. His voice, low, restrained, was enough to make her tremble. "I searched for you, Helena. All these months, I never stopped thinking about you." She looked away, struggling to keep her composure. "Life has gone on, Your Majesty," she said softly. "I have work, responsibilities, and a future I must protect." He took a step closer, emotion thick in his voice. "I never meant to cause you pain. I only want to be where you are." Helena met his gaze for an instant, and time seemed to suspend once more. There was love, fear, and longing. She knew nothing would be simple, but for the first time, hope felt possible. The dinner ended, but that reunion,
would forever mark both their destinies. The king realized he could no longer let her slip away, and Helena, though still afraid, felt that perhaps love still had a chance. For her, for the child she carried, and for the fate that kept pulling them together against every rule in the world.
Helena sat in the small room that had been given to her in the nobleman's household. Though simple, the space radiated warmth. The light curtains filtered the soft glow of dusk, bathing the room in golden tones. There rested her few belongings, a handful of clothes, childhood books, and the most precious secret she now carried within her, the new life growing inside. Seated on a chair, her hands gently resting on her belly, her heart raced as she awaited the king's arrival. Each echoing step in the corridor seemed to announce the weight of that moment. When the door opened and he entered, impeccably dressed, his face tense, yet his eyes shining with emotion, Helena felt fear and relief intertwine within her. "Your Majesty," she murmured, her voice trembling, I need to tell you something important." The king approached slowly, his steps firm yet tender, as though afraid to disturb the fragility of the moment. He knelt to meet her gaze and took her hands in his. "Speak, Helena. Do not be afraid," he said softly, his voice filled with emotion and expectation. "You can tell me anything." She drew a deep breath, feeling the full weight of the decision she was about to make. The fear of the consequences, the politics, the Queen Mother's disapproval, the advisors, public judgment, all pressed down on her. But the truth could no longer be hidden. What they had shared could not be denied, and the child growing inside was living proof of that bond. I'm carrying your child," she confessed, tears welling in her eyes. "I know this complicates everything, but you had to know." For a moment the king was silent, and Helena feared she had made the greatest mistake of her life. But instead of reproach, he released a deep breath. A genuine smile spread across his face, and his eyes filled with emotion. "A child? Our child?" he whispered, touching her face with infinite tenderness, as if that single gesture could shield her from the world. "Helena, you cannot imagine what this means to me. You're giving me the chance to love again, to build something unbreakable." He wrapped his arms around her, holding her close, and for the first time since the fire, Helena felt she was not alone. Someone would protect her, not only from pain, but from the crushing weight of circumstance. "But, Your Majesty," she whispered, pulling back slightly to meet his gaze, "you don't understand. My position, the baby, the politics, your mother, they'll all be against us." The king clasped her hands firmly, his eyes blazing with resolve. "I know, Helena, but none of that matters. I cannot imagine my life without you, or this child growing up not knowing his father. The love I feel for you is beyond titles or duty. I want you by my side, and I'll fight for it, no matter the cost." A warmth spread through Helena's body, part relief, part fear. It was dangerously tempting to feel safe in his arms, to let him share the burden of this new life. But the world outside would be merciless. She knew too well the intrigues of court, the queen's expectations, and the weight of her humble birth. "I love you, Your Majesty," she confessed, her voice trembling. "But I'm afraid of what's to come, afraid of losing you, and our child before he's even born." The king gently lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Nothing they say can erase what we feel. This child is proof of what we've built together. He is our life, Helena, and for that life we will fight. You are not alone. I will face everything, politics, the palace, the world for you and for our child." Tears streamed silently down her face, not only of fear, but of gratitude. For the first time in so long she felt seen, valued, loved. I trust you," she whispered, resting her forehead against his chest. "I want to try, but we must be careful.
society, the palace. He drew her back into his embrace. We'll face it all together, Helena. No one will tear us apart. And as for the palace, my mother, and the council, if I must defy them all, I will. You and our child will have my love, my protection, and my life. His eyes burned with conviction. There was no doubt, no hesitation, only pure, steadfast love. And in that moment, Helena understood that she no longer had to bear the burden alone. For hours they remained there, speaking softly and making plans. He spoke of strategies, of how to appeal to the queen and the council. She, still wary, allowed herself to be touched by a quiet hope that true love could indeed overcome the impossible. With every word their bond deepened. The child, silent and unseen, bore witness to a love that refused to be restrained. Helena placed her hand over her belly, feeling life pulse within, and when she looked at the king, she saw the same promise reflected in his eyes. "So, you truly mean to face it all for me?" she asked, smiling through tears. "For you and for our child," he replied firmly. "Nothing will ever matter more than the two of you." Helena drew a deep breath, sensing a new chapter begin. Between fear and hope, between politics and love, she understood that their connection was indestructible. The child she carried was its symbol, living proof that even amidst life's fiercest storms, love could endure. That night, as candlelight cast dancing shadows across the walls, the two remained entwined, in silence, in promises, in plans. And at the heart of it all lay one unshakable truth: the love that bound them, and the child they awaited, would forever be the bond no power on earth could break.
Dawn broke over the kingdom, bathing rooftops and ramparts in a gentle golden light. But inside the castle, peace was the only thing that did not reign. Along the marble corridors, the bustle was constant. Messengers hurried past one another, counselors exchanged tense whispers, and in the royal office, the queen's face was clouded with concern. A shadow of crisis hung in the air. Rebellious nobles questioned the king's decisions, taking advantage of the political fragility caused by commercial disputes and unstable alliances with other realms. Helena, still discreet, but increasingly resolute, carried out her daily duties with a restless heart. Her pregnancy advanced, and with it grew a sense of responsibility, not only for herself, but for the life growing inside her. She tried to stay away from conflicts, yet fate seemed determined to place her at the very center of turmoil. When she learned that the king had called an emergency meeting in the throne room, she knew something serious was about to happen. The murmurs in the corridors spoke of unease, and somehow she sensed that this moment would change everything. Still, she took a deep breath. Running had never been an option. As she entered the great hall, dozens of eyes turned toward her. Nobles and advisers whispered, some with disdain, others with curiosity. To many, the presence of a commoner so close to the king was unacceptable. But Helena held her head high. Her scars and losses had taught her that dignity was not born of noble blood. The king, upon seeing her, fixed his gaze on her for a brief moment. He knew that the trust he placed in Helena was vital, not only because of the child she carried, but also for the calm she brought him amid chaos. During the meeting, one of the counselors, shaken by nerves, proposed harsh measures against the rebellious nobles. Before the king could reply, Helena, guided by instinct, stepped forward. Her voice was firm, serene, and surprisingly clear. If we offer assurances to those who feel wronged, we may avoid an open confrontation. Negotiation and listening can be far more effective than force. Silence fell over the room.
Never before had a young woman of such humble origins dared to speak before the council. The king took a deep breath, and pride flickered in his eyes. Even the queen, watching from her throne, seemed shaken by Helena's clarity and courage. "Very well," declared the king, his tone firm and commanding. "Helena's proposal shall be implemented. She has reminded us that true power lies not in titles, but in wisdom and character." A murmur rippled through the hall, and even the most resistant among them knew the decision was final. Helena felt the weight of their stares, but remained composed. Inside, however, she feared the consequences her intervention might bring, not to herself, but to the child she carried. In the days that followed, her counsel proved wise. The nobles agreed to negotiate, the unrest was contained, and stability returned to the kingdom, however fragile. Helena's bravery, once met with suspicion, began to earn respect. The woman who had been the subject of gossip now inspired admiration. Not long after, during another assembly in the throne room, the king rose before the gathered court. Silence reigned. Everyone expected political decrees or strategies, but what came next took them all by surprise. "I want everyone to know," he began, his voice echoing through the hall, "that Helena is not merely my advisor, nor a tolerated presence in this court. She is the woman who has captured my heart, and the mother of my child. Her courage and integrity prove that a person's worth is not defined by birth, but by the choices they make and the strength with which they defend them." The words fell like thunder. Whispers ceased, and it was as though the very air had frozen. The queen, stunned, remained motionless, trying to mask the emotion that flickered in her gaze. Some counselors bowed their heads in respect. Others simply stared, speechless. Helena stood still, her heart racing. She could hardly believe what she was hearing. The king was exposing himself, defying convention and danger, all for her. "Your Majesty," she stammered, her voice trembling, I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," he replied, stepping closer and taking her hand gently. "Just know that you and our child will always have my love and my protection. Let them say what they will. Nothing will change what I feel." Tears slipped silently down her cheeks. For the first time since the dark days of her youth, she felt she had a home, a safe refuge, and that she no longer had to fight alone. Time passed, and the bond between the king and Helena only grew stronger. They walked together through the palace gardens, spoke of their child's future, and shared soft laughter at sunset. They were simple moments, yet filled with tenderness, gestures that revealed a love so genuine it could no longer be hidden.
Little by little, the kingdom began to accept her. The whispers faded, replaced by tales of her courage and wisdom. Nobles and commoners alike spoke of her positive influence, and even the most skeptical admitted that Helena's presence brought balance to the king. At an official banquet, before guests and counselors, the king once again rose to speak. The hall fell into expectant silence, yet his words were not about politics, but about love. "This kingdom," he began, his gaze fixed on Helena, "only prospers because there are still those who have the courage to act with truth. Helena showed me that, and she taught me that true love is not measured by status, but by integrity. She and our child will always have my respect and my devotion." This time, the response came in applause. Some sincere, others cautious, but applause nonetheless. And Helena,
deeply moved, felt that the love she had once lived in secret now belonged to the world. In the days that followed, she and the king began preparing for their family's future. They spoke of the baby, of plans and dreams, and between conversations and laughter filled the silences. The child they awaited had become the purest symbol of all they had overcome, living proof that true love could be born even amidst the storms of power. Helena, who had once entered the castle as a simple seamstress, was now loved, respected, and, above all, free to live the love destiny had granted her. And as she walked hand in hand with the king through the palace corridors, Helena knew, at last, that she had found her place in the world. The sun rose slowly on the horizon, spreading golden light across the castle gardens. The morning air was gentle, and the flowers opened lazily, showing their bright colors beneath the dew. Helena walked among the well-kept flower beds, breathing in the scent of moist earth and feeling the soft touch of the breeze. With each step, she recalled the path that had brought her there. A childhood lost to tragedy, years spent fighting to survive, the night that changed her destiny, and the strength she had needed to face a court that once rejected her. Now, at last, she could breathe in peace. The respect she had earned in the castle came not merely from her bond with the king, but from her talent and dedication. As tutor to the young ladies and overseer of the royal sewing workshops, Helena had become an example of grace, wisdom, and discipline. Nobles and commoners admired her, seeing in her living proof that courage, intelligence, and character were more powerful than any title. As she finished a delicate embroidery on the princess's gown for the next ball, Helena sensed someone approaching. When she turned, her eyes met the calm and irresistibly intense gaze of King Edward. He walked toward her slowly, as if savoring each step of the approach. "Good morning, my dear," he said softly, his tone a blend of affection and reverence. "I see you're already turning another ordinary day into something extraordinary." Helena smiled, her cheeks blushing faintly. "Good morning, my king. Or should I call you simply Edward?" she teased, though her heart beat fast. "Titles mean little," he replied, taking her hand gently. "What matters is you, Helena. It has always been you." The light in her eyes spoke more than words ever could. Every gesture, every shared glance between them was a silent reminder of the love that bound them, a love born by chance, strengthened through trials, and sealed by trust. As they walked side by side through the gardens, they spoke of the kingdom's future, the child they awaited, and the dreams they shared. Between conversations and laughter, there were simple, tender gestures, intertwined fingers, knowing looks, smiles that said more than words. To them, even the ordinary felt like a perfect dance between duty and love. "Sometimes you still amaze me," said the king, admiring her. "Your courage, your faith, and the greatness of your heart. You've shown me what it truly means to love." Helena lowered her gaze, moved. "I only did what I thought was right. For me, for our child, for us. I never imagined something so simple could matter so much." She took a breath and smiled softly. "But I want to keep helping. I believe we can make this kingdom fairer, kinder." Edward leaned forward and pressed his forehead to hers, in a gesture of tenderness and gratitude. "And that is exactly what you do, my love. Your presence transforms everything around you, even me." Her heart raced. Every word from him felt like a silent promise of eternal love. And then, unexpectedly, Edward stopped walking, took her hands, and knelt before her. Helena gasped, surprised. The world seemed to stop. "Helena," he began, his voice steady but trembling with emotion. "From the moment you crossed my path, you changed my life. You brought light where there was darkness and hope where there was emptiness." He drew a small gold ring from his pocket, its clear stone reflecting the glow of the rising sun. "I want to spend every day of my life by your side. Will you marry me? Be my wife, the mother of my child, my companion forever?" Tears welled in Helena's eyes. Every sorrow, every struggle, every pain, all of it felt worth it for this moment. "Yes, yes, I will," she whispered through joyful sobs. "I accept, Edward. I accept you, our child, and whatever the future may bring." The king rose and wrapped her in a tight embrace. The scent of flowers and the sound of the fountain blended with the quick rhythm of their hearts. He kissed her forehead, then her lips, sealing a promise that time itself could never break. From that day on, the garden became a symbol of a new beginning. Helena, who had once only been a seamstress, was now the most beloved woman in the kingdom, not for titles or appearances, but for her courage, kindness, and wisdom. As the months passed, she and the king lovingly prepared for their baby's arrival. Helena continued to teach, to sew, and to inspire others through her example. The birth of their child was celebrated across the realm as a sign of renewal and hope. In the stillness of night, while the baby slept in his father's arms, Helena felt the serenity she had sought all her life. The castle, once a stage for intrigue and formality, was now a home where love, courage, and integrity reigned supreme. And as she walked through the gardens at dusk, hand in hand with the king, she knew, at last, that she had found her place in the world.